And so we'll kind of just dive into a little bit of your backstory, how you both got into creating, comics, how you met, and then we'll get to the nitty gritty. I'm excited to talk about this. Is this like your guys' first venture into horror?
Into horror? I guess so.
Yeah, I
I
think
mean,
so.
okay, together maybe. I've I've done multiple like horror short films and stuff like that. Went into film festival and like that, like early, because we're both coming from animation. So I had my early venture into, let's say, like horror-esque or horror content creation early on when I first moved here. But it's the first of our titles that is, I guess, full on like horror supernatural thriller.
Cool. So we are green across the board. I'm good to get this interview started as long as you two are.
Yes,
Yeah.
let's go.
All right, let's begin in 3, 2, 1. Yo, what's up, everybody? Thank you for tuning in to yet again another fantastic indie creator interview. It's your Cape Crusader Cody, and we're keeping it geekly with our two new guests, words today, Amit Tishler and Elliot Sperl. Here to break down the last Wardens and everything in between from Mad Cave Studios. And I was gushing a little bit backstage, not can gush officially live. You two have worked on some awesome properties. Amit, I have you down as a creative director, software designer, animator, and writer, known for works on Camp WWE, Mr. Pickles, and Adventure Time, Hey Ice King, Why'd You Steal Our Garbage? Elliot, writer, director, storyboard artist, known for your work on Bob's Burger, Camp WWE, and even has worked with Will I Am. What is life right now? How'd you two end up meeting? Was it during Animals or Camp WWE?
It was Animals. Yeah. Like we were essentially, we both worked together early in our career as 2D animators. And we met at Starburns Industries here in Burbank, working on the first season of Animals. And then I basically dragged Elliot with me to Stupid Buddy to work on Camp WWE. So the party continued. And that also, I guess, rolls into how we started working together. Because, like after a while, we just found that we have a lot of shared interests, shared goals, and we just decided to unite and produce original stories for honestly any and all mediums that we're passionate about, because we're both gamers, we're both big media consumers. So it could be games, it could be comics, TV, like psychotropic drug-fueled delusions, whatever. Like
I'm in.
Any way that we can tell a story is a way that we would want to. And that started a collaboration that lasted, at this point, we're gonna get close to a decade, in the next few years. I know.
Oh man, that's wild to think about.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think each of us also discovered that we bring something very, very different and unique to the table. And I'll let you talk more about that. I'll just shut up now.
Oh, well, yeah. I mean, Amit has lived this really crazy life. He's immigrated to the U.S. and so his stories tend to kind of lean a bit more dark, as you kind of saw a little bit with, Eden Frost, which he worked on before us, working together, who also another title for Mad Cave. But, you're from Ohio, I'm from Michigan, so I come skipping out of the Midwest, with like wearing some plaid. I mean, not today, but, it's nearby. It's always,
I have plaid in the closet. That's a thing, yeah.
Right? Yeah, that's totally a thing. So, I tend to bring some of the more like lighter aspects to the storytelling, but it's a weird combo, but it works, so we balance each other out.
So how did you both get your starts with your journey? I mean, even before creating comics, just your whole like start into creating just content, consumable content, media, video games. Amit, let's start with you.
You want to start with me? Okay. So for me, it's a loaded question because it's a very long journey that is hard to condense to like a short story, but I'll give it my best. So I originally immigrated here from Tel Aviv over like 12 years ago. My goal was always original content creation for, once again, the things that I was very interested in and inspired me. Like video games and television were a big part of it. I started from comics. It was just, if you're an immigrant, you have to have a skill that would allow you to justify your stay to the government, and that requires a little bit more stability. So I pursued the film career, went into animation, and that was my skill. In retrospect, probably not the best choice for that, but it somehow worked. And when I actually got here, a lot of my focus was on, in parallel, getting into the industry, working on essentially like a lot of different media, whether it's video games or television, while finding out essentially, hey, the ability to produce original content and get it out there through more traditional channels. How do you do that? So, getting representation, writing screenplays, like pitching to TV networks, the comic book publishers, that became a big part of, let's say, my side hustle for a while. And that intersected a lot with my full-time job. Because I was in software for years, got a little bit more technical when it came to like product design. And that ended up leading to me and two more founders from a game company essentially starting our own startup. That was 4.5 years of my life developing media tech and essentially being the boss of an entire team. We eventually got acquired by a transmedia company here in LA. And during this entire span of time, like I think as I was transitioning, because I think like right after Stupid Buddy is when I kind of went into the startup and software design route for a few years. That's when me and Elliot started working together. In all of these endeavors, the goal was always like to do something that is my own, whether it's through technology, through an original story, whether it's comics, whether it's like a TV show. I've kind of touched all mediums at this point. And I think after the startup was done, I got, because that just consumes your life completely, like 24/7. Once that was done, and I got my 9 to 5 and my weekends back, like me and Elliot just decided like, hey, more free time, let's get back to it. Because yeah, you're kind of on hold for a while. You're not like, I didn't have the bandwidth to do much. We tried like to get a few things going, but it was really difficult to be more prolific during that time period. But then we had the time and the bandwidth to do it. And we decided to, hey, go back to the source and try and pitch some original comic books, both as graphic novels and series. And that ended up being very, very, I guess, like fortunate for us, because within the first year that we did that, we pitched and sold our entire slate, or almost our entire slate, like original series. Frost was the first to come out. Then Last Wardens is the second to come out now, and that's the title we're talking about today. And we have 2 more original books coming out with humanoids later next year, and that just started the ball rolling, and we're just running with it, and we're developing more things, and it's been a blast.
Wow. What about you, Elliot? How did you
my story is way more simple. It's pretty boiled down. It's born and raised in Michigan, went to school in New York, SVA. And then that was right during, I think the 2008 crash, basically. And oh man, jobs were bananas, hard to find. But totally randomly, I did an animation test for, it was Titmouse back in the day, for a show called DJ and the Fro. And I basically packed up my life in a suitcase, hopped on a plane like so many Midwesterners before me, and just, made it down to California.
Circling a tornado all the way down.
Right.
That's so cool.
Yeah, it's just been kind of one gig after the next. Landed in Bob's Burgers, which has been a delight, obviously. Worked on everything from, started in animation, just doing animation retakes, and worked my way up to boards and end credits. So
that's so cool. That's awesome.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, let's kind of talk about how your guys' initial introduction worked. I mean, the collaborative process. How did that start between you two?
Man, that's a great question.
I think Elliot's perspective would be more interesting, because I'm kind of a wrecking ball wherever I go. So
that is almost the perfect description for it, though. It's like, I remember we were at Stupid Buddy, because we met, obviously, and got along and got a bunch of lunches together while we were working at Starburns. Yeah. I think maybe I'm wrong about this, but I remember it starting when we were working in stupid buddy, they had this giant warehouse, but in the warehouse they had this little mini log cabin where they had 2 computers where we were just side by side in this weird little cabin inside of a giant warehouse, just working on anime like shots. And I was like, hey, it'd be kind of a cool idea. And you'd be like, yeah, that is a cool idea. And we'd go back and forth on whatever else. And we're like, oh, we should just do it. Yeah, we should do it. And then sure enough, we started, I think, drafting notes like on the job at one point.
Yeah, we started creating like kind of like mock documentation for things. Like that was the beginning of our creative collaboration together, right? Like it was in the beginning, it was, I guess, loose in some sense because we kind of just started from brainstorming, but we are industry professionals, so we're kind of trained to adhere to certain structures and certain protocols. So from the initial like looseness of it, we're just like kicking, okay, let's make this an actual thing. How does this documentation need to be formatted? Who do we show it to? Like, and that's where the more production management business aspects to it kind of sipped in. And from that point on, we had to essentially develop because, once you're doing this and it's all just like, oh, brainstorming ideas, putting together documentation, it's all fun and games. But if you're actually trying to build something that you want to pitch, that you want to sell, that you want to produce, that you want to make, like, you have to treat it as a job, right? It's not just a hobby. And once you treat it as a job, you have to create a more structured process. And that I feel like that took us years to really refine what we have now to that degree. But it all started from essentially a very basic but kind of strict nugget, right? And it's always like, and now we just have a very like mechanical, it's creative, but it's very mechanical. Like we have to go through all the steps and it makes us very, very efficient. And kind of forces us to maintain a certain level of quality. So it always goes, it always starts from like identifying the components that we need. Like, okay, we're trying to pitch a comic book. So we need a deck and we need to essentially plot this much of the outline. And in this format, we need to create a presentation. We need to create some initial designs. All of that process and everything moving forward always adheres to essentially like domain expertise, meaning everything that we do, one of us is essentially in charge of a certain type of tasks or takes the lead on a certain domain. So one leads and one always follows depending on that domain, and we delegate tasks depending on both. And when you think of domains, you think, okay, like story, like narrative, visual, and operations. So like story as, and this, by the way, applies to both the script, the social media marketing that we do, the press, the pitch, production logistics, contract negotiations, essentially like anything that's under operations, one of us takes the lead and the other one can contribute, but somebody always has final say because that allows us to, respect each other's strengths, right? Strength versus weaknesses. Who among us knows more about one thing or the other, or is just better at one thing over the other, and it allows us to move a lot more efficiently, right? Because as long as you respect that, you get to make decisions a lot faster. Not everything is a negotiation, but when you have to make a choice and you have to run, we get to trust each other in that regard, and that just makes for a very good process before and after you sign a contract. After you sign a contract, now you're also liable to working with an external party, so you better get your deadlines. And our goal is always, we don't want to be on time, we want to be early, we want to always over deliver, we want to always do the extra, especially when we're going into an industry where we are relative newcomers. It doesn't matter that we have been in media for such a long time and we've worked on whatever big titles. In the end, when you're going into a niche or going back into a niche or penetrating a certain market, you're a newcomer and you're going to be treated with suspicion, or you're not going to have the easier time of getting noticed. We have to compensate for all of that. Like, we can't sit around and say like, oh, nobody cares because nobody knows who we are. Like, so we have to deliver extra, right? And we try to do that on all fronts. Having that kind of process, I feel, really makes us both efficient and very, very reliable. And yeah, that goes into how we do everything. And Elliot, you can talk about, I don't know, like the discussion, the production. We have an entire
we have an entire process. Basically, we starting from the top, we start with discussion, move on to production, then we review, and then we do sales, and then iteration. So each of those are kind of each individual step. And kicking things off, we start brainstorming with discussions, constructing the core idea, themes, characters, story arcs, and basically all the little choices in the story, just what we want to actually build. From there, once we kind of sort of nail it down, we move on to production, where we kind of start, writing and designing the deck, creating art, designing guides, working on our verbal pitch presentation routine, stuff like that. And then after that, we basically go through what Amit kind of described before, where we review each, quote unquote, finished draft, make sure there's some quality assurance on each other's work. We edit, refine, polish, and eventually lock into what we think is a sales ready version. And I'll kick it back to you, Amit, for the sales.
Yeah. So, like when it comes to sales, like it's about like, we make a list of viable sales targets. Like, hey, we have a horror thriller comic like The Last Wardens. Not every publisher would be a good target for that, no matter how good the product is. So at that point, you're making a list of, okay, we're looking for a very specific kind of relationship, very specific kind of deal parameters, and we want to focus on a specific kind of content. Who's the right publisher for that? So you narrow down your list, and that's how you decide. Like, and now who do we talk to within each operation? And then it's just a lot of iteration, right? You pitch it, you gather feedback. If you need, you reassess, you revise, and you try again until you hopefully reach that sweet spot, which, sometimes takes months, sometimes takes years. And we have examples of both. Last Wardens is a really old property for us. Like, it's an old idea that we believed in a lot, but we also knew that it wasn't perfect until it was. Like, we had to iterate a lot, and we always had to, with each rejection that we got, and we did get a few early on. They were never bad, but you're trying to understand why somebody doesn't bite, or what is it missing. And that is a humbling and important part of that process of like taking it back, reshuffling some things, identifying what's strong about it and what isn't, and then trying again. A lot of our properties, like a lot of the things that we ended up doing, no matter what kind of product it was, went through that process. And I think it's a healthy one that most artists should engage in one way or another.
I really feel that's kind of like a defining moment for a lot of creators, right? Like, they get the rejection, and it's either you keep going and you keep trying to refine it to make it, I guess, work, or you give up. And it's the ability to take that rejection to the chin and learn from it. I feel like it is really kind of the resilience that creators have to learn how to grow.
Yeah. And I think there's, you also have to be attuned to, and this is in all honesty, like it's not all based on quality, and it's not all a fair game in the industry. In the end, some people will have advantages and some won't. And it could be because your best buddy works for a studio. It could be because, like, really, sometimes it's just, I knew somebody and that's how I got the deal. Like, it's not, we don't live in a meritocracy. And if you're trying to get into any industry, you have to use whatever advantage you have, but you also have to compensate in terms of whether you don't. So you have to be smart about it. Like, you can come in with a property and go, this is perfect, this is great as is. And it doesn't matter, even if it objectively is more fantastic than anything else that company heard that day. A person who's worked with that company for 10 years, even if they're pitching trash that very day, still have a better chance than you coming in with your highest quality product. And is that right? No. Is it reality? Yes. So in a way, you have to be very agile. Like, if you go, I care about these very important things about the project that I've just created, but I'm not as precious about these things. And right now, here are the trends, or here are the things that people are looking for. Is there any way that I can keep this, the heart of what it is, true to itself, but still make it fit within those templates so that I have a better chance? That's a good practice to have, as long as you don't feel like you've destroyed your product or it lost its message. Like, it's a fine balancing act, but I feel like being more pragmatic about it and being smart about it and just being realistic about it helps a lot.
the iteration process really is important, because you see a lot of people who just take an idea and refine it and keep it and hide it, and just kind of keep working on it forever and ever and ever. So having this process is really important, because it actually kicks things out the door, which is,
Oh yeah. Gets it in front of people. Like
exactly.
I always say,
And speaking of that, go ahead.
No, I said you need to fail a lot.
Speaking of getting it in front of people, right, there is a link to pre-order The Last Wardens issue 1 from Mad Cave Studios. Guys, be sure to hit that link and pre-order today. If you're unable to, put it on Facebook and Twitter. Word of mouth is 100% free, and it costs you nothing. This is dropping on your local shelf July 17th, if I'm not mistaken. And I had the chance to read this. I was talking backstage about it. Unfortunately, you guys can't hear the juicy details, but everything about this book is so good. And I'm happy we had a chance to kind of explore your collaborative process, because, I backstage, I was talking about how just in-depth it is, how like structured it is, and the breadcrumbs you guys were able to build, just even in some of the beginning pages. And the payoff is just phenomenal. The twist is neck-breaking. It was good. It's gorgeous, gory, and graphic. I absolutely love this title from you too.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I want to start with kind of, where did the idea for this come from? I mean, a horror set in the 70s, it just seems like the perfect, chef kiss. But the way you guys went about it is like a completely different type of horror, I felt, and I'm here for it.
So how we came up with it, that's actually a great question. Amit will probably get into this a little bit himself, but we talked about this being one of our oldest properties. And what's amazing about this is the main character that takes, whose lens is the entire focus of the story, wasn't in the original draft for this, at all. Yeah. That was the last minute ad that we, came up with, that just made everything come together in the story. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, it's funny to think about that now, because it's so hard to try to imagine The Last Wardens without Danielle Pryer at its center.
Yeah.
Like she's a very strong protagonist in terms of her being a driving force for everything that's happening, from the beginning and all the way to the end. But the fact is that the idea, it started always from an almost like Doom Patrol type concept, where you have a bunch of these essentially like paranormal misfits, these monsters that belong to some ancient order in charge of stopping other threats. I'm going to keep all of that as vague as possible at this point. But that actually was the core idea. And in our early iterations, which also had different names, by the way, even though the characters stayed very, very close to being the same, or a lot of them, the way we tell the story and the way we built their world changed drastically. Even the 1970s aspect wasn't in the original drafts. It used to be contemporary. So a lot of these choices came from, some of them very pragmatically, just like out of necessity. For example, 1970s, the minute we changed a few different things in the story in terms of how we wanted the Wardens themselves to function in their role in this world, we also had to kind of identify a potential problem, which is, if you try to, like the whole idea of the Wardens, even without getting too deeply into it, is there are threats in the world. There is a team of somebodies who come in and essentially try to prevent these threats from exploding and destroying humanity along the way. And they're trying to keep their trail clean so nobody's aware of their existence. So they come in, they come out, right? That's very, very difficult to do in current day, right? Especially, you're already seeing the level of disaster that's happening right at the end of the first issue. This is their life. If you have something like that, how do you cover that up in a world where you're full of like, hey, anybody would just take a video and post it on social media instantly? It's so at that point, you can work around it. There are a lot of plot solutions, but now you've created a different story with a very different focus, because you have to deal with that logistical problem very, very often. And because of what the heart of the story is, we didn't really want to deal with that aspect because it would be a distraction. So we went, okay, what's a good time period to place this in that has, let's say, the world that we need in terms of technology and growth and blah, 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 but doesn't have that essentially component yet in it. But even knowing that it's coming, you can imagine, okay, if this world continues to exist in 20 years, the Wardens are going to have other problems to deal with. So it kind of opens up that idea of like, what would the Wardens look like now, or how would they deal with the same issues? But once we made that choice, hey, let's move it to the 1970s, the goal was really to milk it for everything that it's got. It's not just for the style and the visual and the nostalgia factor. It really comes down to which conflicts were important. What was the mental state of people in this part of the world? What was on their mind? What was the collective trauma, the economic woes? Like, all of that really sips into the story. I mean, Bruce and Danielle's prior entire story is that he went missing in Vietnam. Her dad is a Korean War vet. Like, all of these things and how it affects every single character in the story. We took that setting and made it just sip into everything. So it ended up really refreshing what this IP was and rebranding it. And the creation of Danielle Pryer as a POV character was important, because in our early iterations, we always saw everything from the perspective of the Wardens themselves, right? Which are the characters.
That's like a totally different story, it feels like.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a very, very different story. So we basically went, okay, that was actually one of the, I think, eureka moments for us when we did that, because the minute we went, okay, what if the whole idea is that they come into town, total train wreck because they're a mess, as you can tell right from the end of like the first issue. They come in, it's a complete clusterfuck, and then by the end of it, they disappear, right? Like, they vanish into the night. How does it feel if you are collateral, if you're just a person living your life, and all of a sudden this train just comes in and just destroys your entire life? And how do you process it? And for Danielle specifically, she doesn't just process this as a bystander. The thing that they're hunting is her brother, right? And that adds another component of her being essentially in opposition to them. So at first, this starts from a point of tension, and the idea of it all, of course, and I think that's even clear very early on, it's her growth into essentially taking charge of and becoming part of that team, becoming a Warden herself, out of necessity, but still. So that's a very different perspective of how to tell the story, but it allows us to, instead of creating something that feels more like a Doom Patrol failure superhero kind of tale, it really comes down to this is the story of an individual who gets caught in this crazy world, gets dragged into it, and much like it, because there's a lot of mystery components to this story that get unraveled very slowly over time, this allows us to drag that mystery along. And essentially, you're with Danielle. You know as much as she does at all times. So when you're finally discovering something about, like, you want answers the whole time, like, what the hell is going on? Who are these guys? What are they doing? What happened to my brother? Like, you're asking these questions alongside her. And every time you get a new piece of information, you're starting to piece the puzzle together of what's actually happening in this world. What is their role in it? And that is a very different story vehicle. But it elevated it. It created a much more interesting way of telling that story.
I am really shocked to hear that Danielle wasn't a part of the original script. And I'm also equally as shocked to hear that it wasn't originally based in the 70s. The dialogue in this, just how endearing, her friends are. She even has nicknames, Dan's. Like, it's like, she was meant for this story, so the fact that she wasn't in the original pitch just blows my mind. And this thing, the layers to it, the attention to detail. Elliot, I'm curious as to how the process looks like between you two and then the artist for this issue, because some of the attention to just some of these interiors and the paneling. I mean, the paneling at one point feels like more of a traditional comic, and then we get to, I guess we would call it the turning point of the issue, and it's just like the paneling at that point is just so insane and graphic and just beautiful. Like, how did that look like between you three?
Totally agree. That's a great question. Let's kick it off from the top. So obviously, when it comes to story, you know, Amit and I get to lean a lot on his him being a big history buff. You know, he's worked on, you know, Eden Frost, as I mentioned before, so he's always like good for that. When it comes to the art, that's kind of my domain. So I was kind of influenced to use a lot of the monster designs from things that I loved growing up. So you might see a couple references to like in the monster design stuff from the Zoonoids from Bio Booster Armor Guyver. It was an influence. If you remember the old 2000s movie, what is it called? Oh man. Deep Rising. That's right. Deep Rising. The Kraken from Deep Rising also it's a bad movie, but whatever, like influence can come from anywhere, inspiration or whatever. Obviously magical items and monsters from Dungeons and Dragons. And since obviously, look, it takes place in the 70s, there's going to be some references to Jaws and just a sprinkling of like Scooby-Doo, like just a little bit, right? But I created all this, I created an art guide essentially. And we handed this off to Rui, who really ran with it. Now, Rui, going back to your original question, yes, the layout was an entire process. And he was actually someone who made us stop in the middle of issue 1 and kind of go back and rewrite the other 5 issues afterwards, because he added this whole new level to the layout, which you described. So we have, as you can tell in the beginning parts of the comic, things are very balanced when Danny's taking charge and in control. That obviously changes when the Wardens are introduced, and you can tell that the panel layout goes a bit more chaotic. And then whenever our villain takes center stage, that's when the page completely breaks and becomes a chaotic mess, like a completely disrupted is what we call it.
Yeah. And it's something that, parts of it, like the how do we call it, the disruptive, like where you see like all the red veins kind of taking over everything and the whole page gets fractured. That was in the script, right? That was in our original plans. Because Elliot made the original character designs, then Rui essentially like redesigned them in his style and took over the process itself. And he's working very closely with Elliot in terms of art direction. And when we saw the idea of the veins essentially breaking through the page, that was in the script. So we always knew that was going to be a thing. What we didn't know was what Rui was going to intuitively do right in the first 2 pages. When he presents the Wardens, he kind of broke the panels, right? He created that chaotic mess of a layout. And we basically saw that and went like, this will now be just a thing. So, like, this has to be, because it has actual bearing on the story. And the philosophy was always the paneling from that point on. And now it just feels like it's all cohesive, but this was done on the go during issue 1, like Elliot says. Like it's the idea of like whoever is the key driver of the scene, whoever is the dominant force in a scene, that's what determines the paneling. So when the Wardens come in and it gets chaotic, right? Everything kind of fractures. When the Drifter, like the big threat, essentially like invades your scene and takes over with his flesh and bone, that's when you get the disruptive layout, all of the red veins. And whenever Danielle manages to gain control over the situation, it looks more like a standard comic. Things ease up. And you'll see that as the story progresses. And
it's so cool.
We go through her losing control and then regaining control. And that becomes very, very clear and obvious. Like, oh, things are now balancing. She brings balance to this whole thing and she brings control to the team. So that's where it started, but that's how it's essentially like determined the entire path of this entire thing's art direction, and just, made the review process a pain in the ass. But
I really, really liked Danielle's character. I loved how you guys implemented kind of just her upbringing and what it's been like for her. Having the introduction of her brother as well was just like an emotional gut punch. And I just felt so horrible for this character. Without spoiling too much, where are we going to see her go with future issues? Like, where's the direction of her story going to lead us?
I mean, without spoilers, With that, like, look, this again, to dodge spoilers as much as possible in these 6 issues. She's gonna experience a lot of tragedy and a lot of going back to where we started this conversation, a lot of failure. That's actually when we started developing this iteration. We always like to create a core theme or core statement that kind of anchors everything that we do. So we're like, okay, what we're trying to say is this statement, and now every page, every character, every story point has to somehow be related to it, or, you know, serve whatever that statement is, and it really anchors your story and whatever message you're conveying. So with The Last Wardens, failure was a big part of our theme, and the importance of failure and being able to overcome failure. Danielle Pryer specifically, as you'll see over time, I mean, you already kind of see hints of it. She's somebody who has a very hard time letting go, right? Because she doubles down. She's just like, no, I can make this work. And this, she doesn't know when to let go.
Mm-hmm.
And that makes her extremely stubborn. That is an endearing quality for that character. It makes her very compelling, and it makes her like very, very driven. It's also a serious point of failure that she's going to have to get over to resolve wherever this story is going. So that's a big part of her story arc specifically, which is the focus of this big first arc. Obviously for us, we would love to create more stories in this world, and we're sprinkling a lot into it to allow us to do it. She is the entry point. So right now, a big focus is on her. Our hope is that if we do future stories in the world of Wardens, we actually get to do it with all the different characters, with all the different Wardens, that she becomes from frenemy to friend along the way.
Holy crap. And, you know, I really, the theme of failure, just even those around her, right? Like her father in particular, just reeks of it.
Example.
Oh my God. So it's awesome that was kind of a theme, and the way it's implemented. This series like completely blew me away. The detail, the graphic nature of, I mean, it's not like overly bloody, but it's just like that right, perfect touch. Elliot, I would be curious, what are some of the influences you guys drew from when coming up with the script and character designs?
Oh, like I said, there was, you know, a slew of influences that, you know,
a lot of the classic horror. That's
classic horror.
Elliot's
like
obsession.
what about Danielle in particular? I mean,
Danielle in particular.
You know, that's a curveball. I'm trying to think of, like, I think when we looked up, because we did like have a bunch, when we started her first iteration, she was supposed to be a cop, and we actually moved away from that.
Really?
Yeah, she was supposed to be a cop. And then we decided, you know what? No, she needs to be the everyday person. Like, she needs to be somebody who's completely untrained to do everything that she's doing, and she will flail around until she understands what her value is and what she has to do. But I think that's where a lot of the original design references that you used came from. It started from like 1970s cop
fashion.
Yeah.
We wanted her to be a bit of a mechanic as well. So there's that, like,
right.
Yeah.
No, she definitely she definitely comes off as like a more of a badass character.
Yeah,
it seems like capable. So I'm really interested to see where she goes with the next future issues. You guys said there's 6 in total. Any plans of like spinning off? I know you mentioned maybe exploring some more of the Wardens. Is Only Future going to tell on that, or is that kind of in the works? Like,
so there's the things that we can say and things that we can only allude to. All I can say at this point, because a lot of it, you know, like in terms of comics, a lot of it obviously like depends on publisher, performance, scheduling, blah, blah, blah. We would love to do more. I can tell you without announcing it officially that there is already an adaptation of The Last Wardens that we signed for and are starting to work on that is going to exist in a different medium. That's all I can say for now. Okay. And we're hoping to announce that later this year at around like maybe New York Comic Con. That's all I'm going to say for now. We're hoping that we're also going to be able to just continue making comics, but a lot of it we just don't know yet. But we're optimistic because it's it's moving in the right directions or in multiple directions.
That's so cool. Congratulations. Let me go ahead. We're going to be dropping the link to this in chat. Everyone, be sure to check it out. If you're unable to pre-order, simply putting this on Facebook and Twitter works just as much. Word of mouth is 100% free. So with that being said, let's go ahead and put you guys a little bit on the spot. So for anyone who might be on the fence about pre-ordering, what would you like to say to them to kind of help push them over that hump? And we'll start with Elliot first.
Ooh, well, outside of the fact that we put our hearts and souls into this bad boy,
that's everything.
Yeah.
Use guilt.
Oh man, we put a lot of love into the story. We really wanted to put the twists and turns in there, and we just hope you guys love it. You know, keep it simple. Keep it safe. Sorry.
Keep it simple. Keep it safe. I would say, look, if you're a big fan of horror and if you like drama and if you just like an exciting roller coaster of a story, which this very much is, I would say people should at the very least give it a shot. It's got a lot of heart, but it's also got a lot of action. It's got a lot of mystery. I think in the early press release that we did for this, I think I referred to it as a wolf in sheep's clothing. And part of the idea was, no, it was a sheep in wolf's clothing. That's the thing. I reversed it for a reason. So it was a sheep in wolf's clothing because it looks like traditional horror. It looks a little gory and it looks very like violent. But underneath all of that, we're writing a very deep and emotional story, right? Like in a very personal one for this character. And it's something that will carry over. Like you'll actually get both. We didn't want to just create a, grindhouse splatterfest. We wanted something that feels more like modern storytelling, where it does have the additional depth. It's not just there. It's not for shock and shock and horror in that sense. It's there to try and draw you in through compelling characters, through a lot of lore that is hidden in this world. And I think people will really enjoy it because it's different from everything else out there.
No, and that's I think you worded it perfectly. When I was saying it was like a horror, but it was different than one that I was used to. I think you really nailed it. It has that layer of a story that is just, like I said, an emotional gut punch. And I don't know, I want to read issue 2, but I'm afraid to see how dark you guys get with it. Like issue 1 was pretty dark.
No comment.
So wrapping things up, I always ask 2 questions in particular, and that's a little piece of advice and then what you're consuming outside of creating. I'm excited because I'm a video game player as well, if you can't tell by the wall of video games right there. But so for a creator looking to start their journey, their first steps into it, and as creators who've been across many different fields of media, what would be your biggest piece of advice to someone to help them on that? Work
with others. Definitely.
Good.
Yeah. I mean, it's more than that. Obviously, it's so much of my career has a lot to do with making friends, making contacts. That's essential, just absolutely essential. So if you want to create something, and I think it's easier to bounce ideas off of people, even if it's just your own. It's nice to have that rapport with someone else to be able to, work out an idea and refine it.
What type of person should they be looking for?
The total opposite, just like him.
The total opposite of me. Do not team up with people like me.
No, but you should find someone who challenges you, I think, more than anything else. And that's, like I said, Amit and I operate really differently, but it works. Our stories come together and I think create something pretty unique.
I love that. Amit, what about you? What would be your piece of advice?
First of all, you nailed it because networking is huge. The people you work with are the people that will likely change your career over time, especially if they see you as a reliable person. I think that's one of the biggest components. I think another one is discipline and a hint of business savvy. Discipline in terms of you have to be prolific. you can't just create something and expect that the world will reward you for it, right? Or go like, oh, you're so talented. Like you're out of high school, right? You're competing with a lot of talent out there. Some people have more advantages than others. And it could be network. It could be whatever career they had before that. It could be literally just them having a lot of money to invest. So knowing that that is the landscape, being aware that you have to be smart and agile and always adapt. You don't just stick to your guns. You learn on the go and you get humbled. I think a mistake that I've seen very often with people coming into content creation is that they come with a lot of very romantic ideas of what it means. And it's work, right? If you're trying to create a work of art just for yourself, that's fine. You know, you get to do it like this. But I think for me and Elliot, like we come from media and we got into media with the drive of, hey, this is the thing that inspired us. This is what we always wanted to do. And we wanted to recreate the kind of feeling that that gave us, right? And most artists, I believe, to some degree, have that in them, especially if they decide to create content on their own. Knowing that that is your drive and that that is your goal, you have to learn about what you're actually facing. And that means, and that's the second part of it, a little bit of business savvy, meaning you have to actually understand who you're dealing with, what's the entities that you're going to be dealing with, whether it's publishers, development executives, and TV shows, like producers. Like you have to understand what other people care about, how they view the world, which is going to be very different from an artist's point of view, and not dismiss it, not simplify it, not denigrate it, because you're going to need to understand it in order to have a conversation and find good partners. And I think that there is a lot of forced ignorance when it comes to like people who come into the industry of just like, I don't need to know this because I'm an artist. I'm like, so are we. And artists are their own businesses, and they need to be smarter about everything, whether it's contract negotiations, understanding how the industry itself operates, understanding the importance of marketing, the kind of platforms and the kind of medium that they're doing, like the shortcomings of, creating a product in a specific kind of way versus another. Like these are extremely important things. And if you want to turn it into a job, or you want to really make something that people will see or will have that kind of impact, you have to go outside of your sheltered bubble, I suppose. Like you have to expose yourself to things that, you know, I can tell you, like as somebody who's navigated technology and media and all this, I have met a lot of people and seen a lot of people that I liked, and I've met a lot of people and learned a lot of things that I wish I didn't know. But all of that contributed to how I operate, and it contributes to how we operate, and it is important because it also makes you a better partner to whoever you work with, both on a personal level, because you get to challenge each other and you get to evolve together and you get to lean on each other's expertise, but also in terms of whoever you partner up with, whether it's PR people, marketing executives, the actual publishers that are investing in you. Like these things are important. So do the groundwork. Don't just talk to each other in a bubble. Actually learn how things work, because it's going to serve everybody in the end of the day.
I love that so much. It's an awesome piece of advice from both of you. Let's wrap things up with what you're consuming outside of creating. So, Elliot, what are you up to, you know, book-wise, TV show, video games?
Man. So, sorry, really quick on the video games note. Amit and I are both big From Software fans, and we're just very excited about the upcoming Elden Ring DLC.
Oh my God,
Yes.
that's what, the 21st?
Oh, that's going to be fantastic.
So let's talk builds. The last time I'm huge with Soulsborne. So Bloodborne, I've like blood level 4 completed it, I think last year. That was hard. You know, Dark Souls 3, I with Elden Ring, I was Ooga Booga, you know, I had the Ultra Great Sword, and then Godric's Grafted Great Sword. So dude, I loved it. What builds did you guys do?
I did the boring blood sword build, but now I think I went for the DLC. I'm going to create a brand new character, which is going to be sword, shield, and faith.
Ooh, I love that. I heard intelligence just is getting nerfed so hard on it. I haven't touched it in a while though.
That just means there's going to be worse stuff in the DLC, which actually sounds great. Oh, I can't wait.
First of all, credit to Elliot. He got me into Souls. Like, I'm a big gamer, but Souls, that was him just bugging me for I don't know how long. And then when Elden Ring came out, he was like, okay, listen, I mean, I know you're not, you have to try this. And I just cracked and I went like, you know what? All right, screw it. Like, let's do this. And he ruined my life. At that point, I finished it, and you know the itch. You know, once it clicks, there is the itch. And then I went back and played every single Souls game out there. Like,
it's so good too.
And I don't know if you played, like, I know Elliot hasn't played it yet, but if you're a big Bloodborne fan, Lies of P is incredible.
Mm-hmm.
That is basically Bloodborne 2, and it is tight as hell. It's the only non-FromSoft Souls game that I can say feels just as tight as a FromSoft game with less poison.
You know, it's funny because what was it? I want to say Bloodborne was my first venture into Soulsborne, and then after that, I went through Dark Souls 1, 2, and 3, and I did all the optional bosses. And that was like my first venture onto Twitch. It's like I almost got partnered doing. I died at least 3,000 times completing all the games, all the DLC, or for the cause. Like, that was 8 hours straight trying to beat that dude. That made me scream. Oh, I broke a controller squeezing the touchpad out of it. But man, it's just like Dark Souls and Soulsborne. It's like the resilience, you know, just going. Oh,
see, praise the sun. Praise the sun. There we go. Oh,
hey, and I got one better. This guy, $40, but I had to get him.
Oh my God, it's amazing.
Now I just want to shatter it.
But that is phenomenal. Outside video games, Elliot, TV shows and books, anything that you're reading or watching?
Ooh, let's see. I've been on a real Junji Ito kick.
Oh my God. Yeah, you guys are so cool. Can we be friends already?
Yes, we can.
Come over to California.
I just picked up, what was it? Smash not too long ago. The collection, the hardback collections. They're like $24-25 a pop, but they are phenomenal. I didn't realize he has so much out there.
I know. Yeah, honestly, I just reread Spiral again. It's just it's great. Yeah. Amit, what about you?
Oh my God. So again, big media consumer. I mean, can you tell? But
did you see the Lego set that just came out? It's like $300.
No,
I saw it. I know.
Yeah, no, I'll tag you on it on Twitter. It just came out with a huge Lego Legend of Zelda Lego set. It has Ocarina of Time and then Breath of the Wild.
Oh, that is beautiful. Okay, that's awesome. So like, I'm trying to think of like things recent. Like, I watch a lot of stuff. I read a lot of stuff. It's one of the best animes I've watched this year, but everybody's been talking about it, so this shouldn't be a shock. But Frieren, A Journey's End, amazing, because I'm a big anime fan. Watching Hacks on HBO Max, I just finished like everything that's currently out, which is a fantastic show. Not enough people are talking about it. And I started watching The Three Body Problem as well, which is excellent. Both me and Elliot just finished Final Fantasy VII Rebirth because you kind of have to.
Oh, the nostalgia bomb.
You kind of have to. It kind of just, And right now I'm playing Dragon's Dogma because my wife is done with it, and now it's my turn.
So I have Genova tattooed on me too from Final Fantasy VII. I love it. I love it. This has been one hell of a podcast. I got Majora's Mask right here.
Dude, I walk around with Zelda shirts, and I have a big Skull Kid mask shirt that I really, really love. Like, that was my old. I had when I was back in the day when we were on message boards and forums the whole time in the internet. Like, Skull Kid was one of my nicknames because Majora's Mask.
I love that.
I'm a nerd. Yes.
I love that. This has been one hell of a geek break. The end's always my favorite because that's when you get to like really like, yeah, dude, like, oh my God, me too. I love it. I hope you all have had a fantastic time. Here is a link to pre-order The Last Wardens. It's coming out the 17th, so make sure you get your pre-orders in while you still can. And if you can't, put it on Facebook and Twitter. Word of mouth costs you absolutely nothing. I hope you all have a fantastic Wednesday, but most importantly, keep it geekly.